In the meantime, though, just to get us started, something not Pokemon related, I saw this dropped and I really wanted to watch it because I love watching these. For those who don't know, GameSpot has brought on Jonathan Ferguson, and they'll explain the main details. But I love having him look at video game stuff because it's awesome. It is. This is a really neat thing GameSpot's doing. And I love Jonathan Ferguson. He's really good at this. Okay, now and this is the GameSpot System Shock Weapons Analysis by someone who really knows what they're talking about. You'll see. So we're gonna do this first.
This is Jonathan Ferguson, the keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week he's taking a look at the 2023 remake of System Shock.
This has got a sort of double pump to double charge the ammunition. So it's like pumping a second round into the chamber, which obviously would be impossible with a conventional firearm.
Make sure to subscribe and let us know what other games or guns you'd like to see Jonathan break down in the comments section below. Right, let's take a look at the sci-fi weaponry of System Shock.
Why'd my tracking die again?
Right, so this is a pretty unusual looking pistol, I think it's fair to say, but it functions very simply, it's very pistoly. It functions much like a contemporary self-loading pistol, but the sort of art design of it is very different. And seeing it on its own on the floor at the beginning there, without seeing the environments or the characters or anything, I have to say I thought it looked a bit ugly, but in context it does match the art style, harking back to the original System Shock, I guess. I should state up front, I don't remember any of the weapons from that game. I do remember the game. Right, so the most information I'm getting from this is in the reload animation, where we can see that this is a slide, but the gun is very blocky underneath. It's like it has an upper receiver.
We're gonna need to restart
the
because I was paying attention to fixing my tracking, not the video. Sorry.
This is Jonathan Ferguson, the keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week he's taking a look at the 2023 remake of System Shock.
This has got a sort of double pump to double charge.
I kind of figured he wouldn't
So it's like
this
pumping
one.
a second round into the chamber, which obviously would be impossible with a conventional firearm.
Make sure to subscribe and let us know what other games
he's
or
a
guns
firearms
you'd like to see
expert who's
Jonathan break
played
down
most
in
of the games he's
section
talking
below.
about.
Right, let's take a look at the sci-fi weaponry of System Shock.
Right, so this is a pretty unusual looking pistol, I think it's fair to say, but it functions very simply, it's very pistoly. It functions much like a contemporary self-loading pistol, but the sort of art design of it is very different. And seeing it on its own on the floor at the beginning there, without seeing the environments or the characters or anything, I have to say I thought it looked a bit ugly, but in context it does match the art style, harking back to the original System Shock, I guess. I should state up front, I don't remember any of the weapons from that game. I do remember the game. Right, so the most information I'm getting from this is in the reload animation, where we can see that this is a slide, but the gun is very blocky underneath. It's like it has an upper receiver inside the slide, which is a bit weird. Normally you see the exposed barrel, and there'd be just sort of negative space and then the bottom of the frame. But in this case, the frame is really tall and envelops the barrel, and the slide is wrapped over the top of that. That's quite unusual. And the magazine
I think there are a
has-
couple
it
guns
has
like
sort
that, though.
witness holes so you can see the rounds, but at the top, which isn't,
Like, isn't the
well, I guess it
5.7
still
like that?
works. You could still see when you were
Is it
low on,
the
very
5.7?
low on ammunition if you pop the magazine out. The rounds appear to be, they are depicting complete rounds in the magazine. When the cases come out, they appear to just be plain cylinders with a flat base. So yeah, this is an unusual one, I think. Right, bit of a gear change here from a conventional-ish cartridge firearm to something very, well, Star Trek is what leaps to mind. Some of the sort of ribs and the general curved shape of this
Star Trek doesn't have
says,
normal
I don't know,
triggers.
next generation movie era Trek phaser to me, with some additional kind of stuff on the front. I'm not sure what that does. So it almost looks like yellow and black hazard markings, and then there's sort of a bridge type armature thing around the muzzle. Don't know what that's supposed to do. What it does in aesthetic terms is break up that otherwise quite organic curve. And then I was thinking the lights on the top were going to be the phaser power setting. They're not. That's an overheating gauge. So we have the standard trope of energy weapons, blue electricity in this case, overheating the weapon as a sort of substitute for ammunition. Sometimes you get both, but usually it's one or the other. And then what I had to really hunt for on the model, which if this was a real thing would be a negative point in terms of ergonomics and human factors and all of that, is the actual selector. It has 3 positions on the side and a dial, and there's low, medium and high. So, like microwave cooking or something, and you kind of are microwave cooking on the high setting because they turn into chunks.
I like that he mentioned that it was hard to find a negative to that. Because if he has a difficulty finding a negative, then there's difficulty finding a negative. I think that's really neat about the game's design, that he had to hunt for some, something, and it was barely something. That was neat. Oh, I haven't found this one
Right,
yet.
so we're into our long guns here, and first reaction is this looks a bit Oblivion assault rifle. If you remember the Tom Cruise sci-fi film Oblivion, which I believe
not seen
it was an ACR, Remington ACR.
I have now seen Oblivion.
In a
It does
very
look a bit
well
like
designed casing, and actually looked very different. Still with a little bit of a Star Trek phaser vibe. I think just from some of the styling. I don't think I'm going to be seeing energy bolts coming out of this thing though. I'm going to be seeing gunfire. We have got a futuristic take on the Picatinny rail, which really just looks like a Picatinny rail. But as we've mused before on this series, hard to improve on that basic design, I think. I think that could be with us for a long time. And then details like we have a selector with an LED to show you what you've selected. We can see a magazine catch. We can see a cocking handle. Let's see how it operates.
The rifle has, it can fire 2 types of ammunition. I think it's magnesium that can set enemies on fire, or there's a round that's just called penetrator, which punches through armor a bit better.
Can you tell, is there a readout for the ammo anywhere, or is it just...
I think red is magnesium, blue is the penetrator round from memory, and the penetrator round is that meteor sound as well, which is nice.
Oh, yeah. Right, so in action, we have 2 different types of ammunition here, and the ammo counter is not just counting the rounds, it's telling you, or reminding you, I suppose, which type of ammunition you have loaded. We have a muzzle flash that's different between the 2, and effects, although it was a little hard to try and figure out what was going on at first, the effects on the target are different as well. So the blue, we've got conventional or armor-piercing type, purely kinetic rounds that are notionally chipping off chunks of hot metal from the wall, I think is what's being represented there. And that's just sort of plain damage. And then there's an orange coloured readout, and that's giving us a different muzzle flash, a different report as well. So once you've played the game for a while, you should know pretty quickly which one you're using. You've got an audible indicator, you've got 2 or 3 visual indicators, depending on what you're looking at. That's somewhat unique, I think. How sort of effective these different rounds are on different enemies, not incredibly evident from footage, but I assume that there is a noticeable effect to make it worth having those different rounds in the game. Trying to figure that out made me realise that when the magazine is being removed from the rifle, the counter goes down to 0, which means that the rounds are feeding straight from the magazine like an open bolt firearm. Assuming the weapon is functioning correctly, when you detach the magazine, there should be no rounds left in the gun. Whereas a closed bolt weapon, there will always be a round left in the chamber when you remove the magazine. If they were replicating that effect, as it were, that system, then you would always have the wrong round fire first for the next shot. They're either thinking open bolt, I don't think so, because it doesn't look like it functions that way, or they are just, for the sake of gameplay, let's just have, when we take the ammunition out, all the ammunition comes out.
I know where he was going with the ammunition thing, but I think that it's also something that's pretty forgivable in a sci-fi setting in particular, the idea that it rounds are no longer stored in the chamber, that things have changed just slightly to where you can get sort of a open bolt, closed bolt hybrid type setup. Oh, hello, Gamer Pharaoh, welcome. What? What? Okay. I think. But welcome, yes. We're reacting, then we're doing Smash and Pass, then we're doing Nuzlocke. Because I am ADHD and so is the stream.
Another energy weapon with a similar sort of system. 3 settings again, although for some reason they're not lighting up different colors, which I think would probably be helpful. With these
Probably.
3 blue dots being in just slightly different positions, I don't think that's a great control system for what's essentially your selector.
I haven't seen
anyway,
much worse.
Minor point. The overall design of this I really like. The curves and the panels, the animated portions with the expanding muzzle, purpose of which isn't entirely clear, but I think it's to do with heat dissipation, and certainly the 3, or presumably 6, heat sinks that pop out of the side. It's all very sort of dynamic and
I'm so looking
impressive,
forward
and you
to
know
getting
that
these.
something big is coming when you do the big charge shot that we've seen. And then we've got the heat bar above the on the rear setting, which sort of showcases the pixel art, or 3D pixel art, almost sort of Quake 2 reminiscent. It's obviously better graphics than that, but you can see that it's it's translucent, this window on the back of the weapon that contains your readout, but it's also pixely. So it's clearly a conscious design choice, and I find it quite interesting. But this whole weapon so far for me is the most successful design. The way it combines, the way it delivers the damage, with how it's animated, with how it's held, with its general lines as a science fiction weapon.
I do like how much of these he's liking relative to
This
many
is the
games.
mag pulse rifle.
Okay.
Shoots electromagnetic charges. But if you pump twice, the game in the game it says it fuses 2 cartridges or 2 charges together to fire one big one. It's basically like a slug throwing electromagnetic shotgun.
Yeah, interesting. Right, next up we have the Mag Pulse, and I thought this was probably going to be a machine pistol or something, but I'm not sure why in retrospect. Just the sort of form factor of it, as it were. But it functions as a very compact sawn-off pump shotgun, but it's using some sort of energy ammunition, magnetically accelerated or something. In fact, when it's fired, it makes a very sort of electromagnetic sounding noise, to me anyway. But how it functions is kind of bizarre. So we have the pump grip that encloses the weapon, but then under that there's a slide as well, but that only moves when you reload. It's a bit like when there's a mistaken reload animation where the slide only locks to the rear when you hit the magazine catch. I'm not sure that's the intent. Well, it's obviously not the intention, but I don't know that applies here because of the weird electric ammunition. Having said that, the magazine is like a normal magazine in the pistol grip for a normal pistol, which goes against the idea of it being a shotgun. We'd expect a tube magazine if this was a shotgun, but of course this is a science fiction weapon, so they can do what they want.
I think there are magazine-fed pump
And the
actions,
really
though.
interesting aspect is the double pump. So instead of being able to fire, say, have 2 barrels, and you can choose to fire one or both, and then you just reload the one if you don't fire both. This has got a sort of double pump to double charge the ammunition. So it's like pumping a second round into the chamber, which obviously would be impossible with a conventional firearm. Here it's sort of using electrical energy to accelerate something. Not sure what, some sort of plasma, hard to say. Certainly an interesting weapon that's changing things up a bit while still having a familiar mechanic for an FPS.
Okay, before we get going, I would like to add my own half cent to this. So, since it is an EM gun, consider the following. First of all, I'm pretty sure there are magazine-fed pump-action shotguns. Excuse me. But having the magazine in the farthest back, in this case the pistol grip, actually makes extra sense because it is a railgun or more likely coil gun. it is you want as much distance to accelerate as possible in a railgun or coil gun, and the way they work, you really can have the magazine as far back as it goes because there is no conventional bolt that needs to reciprocate behind the round. Some of the coil guns that exist in real life, one of which I really, really want, what is it, the EMG, I believe, they just drag they actually drag the bolt straight forward from the magazine using their coils. They're at most they have just a tiny little pin that knocks them forward, depending on design. So from that perspective, the loading mechanism is the loading mechanism being a magazine in the pistol grip, the rear pistol grip, makes perfect sense. As for the double shot, I don't really have anything for you. I don't. The only thing I could guess, which is a little bit of a but why, is that there's a secondary set of coils and it's literally double barrel, but I couldn't tell you why you would do that because there's still the issue of charging up. But from the magazine point of view, that's actually makes a lot of sense if it really is a coil gun or railgun.
Okay, another very chunky pistol with the same stylings as the smaller pistol and reminiscent of the Magpulse as well is this kind of Desert Eagle in space. It's a bigger, more powerful pistol, as the description implies. What it doesn't seem to have is much in the way of recoil. Don't know if it's supposed to have inherent recoil dampening or something. Physics is hard to get around, so I don't know how they've done that if they have. But fundamentally, this operates just like an ordinary pistol. The slide kind of motored itself to the rear at the point of reloading quite slowly, which is weird. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So we fire our last shot, and then instead of the energy of that shot, essentially, whether it's blowback or lock breach, instead of that propelling the slide to the rear, it's like it doesn't, I don't know. It's like so recoil damped that it doesn't have any recoil that affects the slide at all, and then it motors its slide open for you to reload. I don't understand that at all, in fact.
No comment.
Something I failed to point out on the low powered pistol, so let's point it out on the Magnum, are the sights, which look like iron sights that someone forgot to file the groove in the rear of. As I mangle the English language there. If you're not following me here, it's like there's a block at the front that would suffice perhaps for a front sight, but then there's another solid block at the rear. But those are going to do very little. You can line up two solid metal blocks and they're better than nothing maybe, but probably, given that the rear sight would obscure the front sight entirely, you'd be better off with just a front sight or no sights at all. And you know it's coming. Where are the red dot sights? There ought to be red. If this is the future of our universe, or really any universe with this level of technological sophistication, there should be red dot sights or something even better.
I have
absolutely everything by default.
I might have an
there'd be no
explanation
reason for
this,
iron
but
sights.
I don't
Least of
know
all
that
iron
it is
sights
an
that don't
in-universe
even work.
Okay. Best I could guess a slide is a magnetizer and 2 pumps gives the ammunition a maximum level charge. Maybe. I mean, that's a heck of a magnetizer, but that could work. It does use double the ammunition though, so I'm not sure. HUD? Yep, the HUD. This is taking place in a cyberpunk future. Even if it's an old school cyberpunk future, it is a cyberpunk future, yep, where this interface that we have, our character in universe has. This is, it is what our character is seeing. And presumably, other people have some type of HUD just as a natural part of everyday life. So it could very well be that weapons get very rudimentary sights just as a backup, but the expectation is that you will be using your cybernetic augmented reality sights when firing a weapon. That's what I would guess. I don't know if that's I do not know if that actually is the explanation in universe, but that is what I would assume would be the reason why so many weapons have no meaningful sights to begin with, and the few that do are like decorative or the ultimate and backup. But I mean, I would say you can't even knock those two post sights for being terrible, because there are worse sights in real life. The Taurus curve doesn't have any sights. It has a plus sign painted on the back of the slide, and they tell you just put this over the target, and that's how you aim. You put the plus sign on the back of the slide over the target and hope that you're pointed straight. Taurus curve is an awful fire. But it's proof that there is worse than two bad posts. Alright, continuing.
A grenade launcher. I like this one. The sort of chainsaw grip. That's the phrase I'm looking for. There's a weird pump action shotgun chainsaw type grip that you can get to attach to a shotgun, so you pump it overhand. Some of you will have seen that, I'm sure. This reminds me of that, but it's something a bit different. We've seen lots of different grenade launchers. They usually just open with a sort of unseen latch. It's not usually clear how they're opening up, if that's how they load, and they're not just magazine fed. Single shot grenade launchers and rocket launchers for that matter. So this has a nice big mechanism that makes some noise, and you can understand how it works. It opens a breech, you shove it around, you close it, you fire it. There's no kind of fudging of how this thing is working with servo motors or magnetic levitating parts or anything like that. But it doesn't look like anything that we have now, so it's good.
That's the new railgun, isn't it?
Right, this says it's a railgun, and probably could have guessed that it was meant to be one, even if it didn't say railgun in the head-up display. So I guess this is supplying both projectiles that are being accelerated by the rails, or they look more like coils looking through those opening flap things, and electricity. I think there's a lot of electric sparking going on, and those, so we insert that whole thing in, including what looked like the coils, and then those flaps with the blue lights on close over the top. Not entirely clear what's supposed to be going on, but hey, how do I know how a handheld railgun is going to function? Right, so it looks like you can...
Note that it is a railgun, again, with no meaningful sights whatsoever. This is just a block that blocks the little hole there. You're not wrong about this up to... I assume about the curve. The gun has no crosshair security. Did you update your cyber to connect to the gun? No. Well, we'd fix that, but Shodan, so...
You can somehow boost this thing using the energy of your suit. So we see these flaps close up sort of one finger at a time, quite slowly, but the whole process was sped up by the suit there, so it's not entirely logical as to why that would... Well, I guess the magazine's supplying the bullets, for want of a better term, and it's sort of onboard electricity, but you're able to inject some in from your suit. I guess it sort of makes sense that you just locking the magazine in gives you your projectiles, charging the gun from the capacitor or whatever on the magazine. That, I guess, is the bit that's being sped up. So there's as much sense as I can make of it. If you see...
My understanding is it has a built-in capacitor that charges at a set rate, and then you use your suit's power to speed up the charge. So, what he was guessing at. My understanding is that, because I don't think that was in the original game.
The actual railguns being fired, it is just nothing. It's a very, very fast projectile that you can't see with the naked eye, and then the effect on the target. You wouldn't see anything to speak of at the other end, and you wouldn't get a trail. I guess in certain atmospheric conditions you might get a trail. There's no projectile trail here. You definitely get the sense from it has recoil, and it has a sort of high energy sounding effect as those coils are energized. So it's as good a railgun as any, really.
This being the game's SMG, it apparently fires 9mm, but can shoot Teflon coated rounds. Lots of different ammo types in this game.
So you mentioned Teflon coated rounds. That's a real thing. I can't even remember
Yes, it
why
is.
it was done originally, but there was a certain brand of Teflon coated ammunition marketed in the US back in the 80s, I think it was, and it became hugely controversial because the concern was that the Teflon would let it penetrate Kevlar and it would be a cop killer round, which I believe was not true. Suffice to say, the technology exists. Whatever purpose it may have in real life, not much I would suggest, because I'm not aware of Teflon being used to coat bullets anymore. Clearly there's a reason for doing it in the future. I'm not sure what that is. On the face of it, this is a pretty conventional submachine gun. It's visibly a modern machine submachine gun. It has a stock. Made sci-fi. So again, a bit like the pistols, it doesn't really do anything that, say, a UMP or its namesake, a Scorpion Evo 3, wouldn't do. If you just put that in the game. I'm not saying they should have by any means, because don't know when this is set, but most of those would probably be in bits by that time. So we expect to see something new and different. What I'm getting at is that these bullet-firing weapons in the game aren't really bringing much to the table that their modern-day counterparts don't do.
Up to is correct. Teflon is not as good as newer armor-piercing rounds. It is pretty decent as far as AP goes against hard armor, chiefly metal. It is terrible on soft body armor. And I'm actually, you know what? I'm actually not so sure how good it does against frangible body armor, like with ceramic plates. The only thing that I know it's ever been proven to be better than conventional ammo against is raw metal, as mentioned, metal car bodies. I don't know how it does against ceramics, but up to is right, it is terrible against soft. Newer armor-piercing rounds are significantly better all-around armor piercers.
So this is the in-game shotgun. There's 2 ammunition types, Flechette and Dragon's Breath. And it's actually called Dragon's Breath in the game as well, so it's not just some nod.
Someone failed to trademark Dragon's Breath.
So you've got either tiny darts or lots of fire.
Right, it's another pump-action shotgun in space, because we don't seem to be able to get away from the pump-action shotgun. I think they've done a...
I think it was tested on carbon fiber. That would make sense. Just because of how carbon fiber works, it would make sense. Teflon is just... It's a very specific used round, but in this game, when most of what you're shooting at is thick metal-plated robots, of course Teflon's gonna actually be useful. And I know where he's going with the pump-action shotgun. I've heard it over and over again. I have no way to defend it.
A good job of differentiating it with the enveloping pump grip, as it were. There's no reason to have it wrapped around the front of the weapon like that, but it does look distinctive and it does look cool. 2 different ammo effects here. One is equivalent to buckshot. I'm informed that it's flechettes. There's no way you could know that, and to be fair, if you're shooting it out the end of a gun, you're not necessarily going to know that either. The difference in reality is quite significant, though. Flechettes are, well, pretty questionable load for a shotgun. They are meant to be more penetrative, but they are very small diameter. They're like little needles. So they're going to do a lot less damage than a 32 caliber buckshot pellet times 9 or whatever the ammunition you're shooting. So the effects we're seeing here are maybe more consistent with buckshot, and the flechette thing is kind of it's a futuristic shotgun, so it's firing flechettes. What's different is, or somewhat different, is the incendiary effect here, which is being described as Dragon's Breath, which is fair enough. But it doesn't look like Dragon's Breath. The sort of the magnesium particle effect that you get from Dragon's Breath is quite distinctive. This looks more like some other incendiary effect with burning gas or something almost. So it has its own effect. And I think I can tell, even without playing it, that the flame effect is way more effective on the organic enemies, and it doesn't do a great deal to the robotic ones. So that would be the reason for it. You've got your pseudo AP flechette rounds for the robots, and you switch to your Dragon's Breath for the soft, squishy people.
Having it wrap over the body would help if you wanted to slam fire it and his rib to make it use. This is true. Grab the top, hold the trigger down, pump. This is very, very true. For alternative firing, yes, though I'm going to agree with Jonathan's usual complaint that why is it not just semi-automatic? That can be done in the future much easier. Why is it not just semi-automatic? I will agree with him on that. I will actually contest the flechette point. Now, I have seen some modern tests of redone flechettes. He's probably thinking of like the, when was it, the 70s experiments with flechette shotguns, which did, a strong wind would knock the flechettes over and it wouldn't hit the target. I have seen some modern shotgun tests with redone flechettes that fire out of effectively a shotgun magnum round, something that's much more powerful than traditional shotguns. But 80s ACR flechette rifles, yeah, I think that might be what I'm thinking of. But I've seen some modern flechettes which use a much more powerful round charge and fire fewer, larger, very dense flechettes instead of the very, very thin ones, very small, thin ones that they did use. And while I don't know if they're technically superior to traditional buckshot, they were actually effective as far as being able to hit the target and penetrate. So, I don't know if they're better than buckshot, but they're useful as opposed to the old ones, which really weren't. So flechettes are getting better. So, to me, the thought would be, well, by the time that this takes place, can't see lead spheres doing much on thick robot bodies. True. If you were to specialize them as an armor-piercing round in particular, I can see that. Again, especially if you are even further increasing the charge behind them and sticking to those very dense, like firing tungsten flechettes. I don't remember what the ones I saw were made out of. I think they were just a steel composite or something. But if you were to fire like tungsten armor-piercing flechettes, those would probably be pretty devastating. Where instead of firing the like 20 or whatever that you got of the tiny little ones, you're firing maybe 5 or 6 of these heavy ones. Okay, yeah, that. Well, I think just in saying that we might have a reason for it to be pumped. But what's your explanation? I'm gonna let this play while you type since we're almost done. I just saw that.
All right, guys, those were the guns of
That was
System
it.
Shock, the new one, that is. Hope you enjoyed it. Please do join us here at the Royal Armouries if you can in person. If not, we have all sorts of electronic goings on, including our own YouTube channel and various social media outlets. And keep an eye out for any events that might be happening later in the year. In any case, we'll see you again next time.
This one starts with XP in the name, which means experimental, so it's meant for testing ammo. That's a really good point. That would be a really good point. That would work. The idea that it's for because we're on a research facility. One design for combat was for prototyping ammo. That would make perfect sense. We're on a freaking research facility where they are doing that kind of stuff to begin with. That would make perfect sense. Up to I think you're onto something. Especially since the shotgun wasn't in the original System Shock. The shotgun actually replaces the old riot gun, which was like a stun shotgun in the original. Also, you didn't get it near as early as I got the shotgun. And the riot gun was absolutely useless in System Shock because you need to kill these really tough things, not shoot rubber bullets at them. So I am very happy for the switch to the shotgun, and the idea that it's for prototyping ammo on the station, not meant to be a dedicated weapon, makes perfect sense because they're doing weapons research on the station.